Are you staring at your savings account balance, feeling a false sense of security just because the numbers on the screen haven't dropped? You see $100,000 sitting there, and you think you have built an impenetrable fortress. But let me give you a brutal mathematical reality check that should keep you awake tonight. If you leave that capital parked in cash while the real inflation rate hums along at a relentless 5%, you are not preserving wealth. You are actively bleeding out. In exactly 10 years, that 100 grand will only buy you what $60,000 can purchase today. You just permanently forfeited 40% of your stored energy, and you didn't even have the dignity of seeing a market crash take it away. It was systematically siphoned from your ledger while you congratulated yourself for playing it safe. Think deeply about what that money actually represents. You trade 40 or 50 hours of your week, sacrificing your youth and mental bandwidth for a paycheck. You are converting your finite life for such a fiat currency, assuming the system will faithfully store that energy for your future. But who is silently standing in the shadows, slicing off 5% of your hard-earned labor every single year while you sleep? It is the hidden acts of monetary debasement. A quiet thief that does not need to pick the lock on your door because it already has unrestricted access to your bank account. You are tirelessly to fill a bucket with water, completely oblivious to the gaping hole at the bottom. The cost of your groceries and medical care is compounding exponentially, while your stationary capital rots from the inside out. And what is your natural reaction when you finally notice prices exploding at the supermarket? You do exactly what the establishment expects. You panic. You cancel minor luxuries, and you try to hoard even more fiat cash into that very same savings account. If this is your strategy, then I must bluntly tell you that you are committing a catastrophic error. Trying to outsave a depreciating currency is a mathematical impossibility. Cutting expenses and hoarding cash in an inflationary environment is like trying to survive a burning building by locking yourself in a wooden closet. Your instinct to retreat into the perceived safety of liquidity is precisely what guarantees your purchasing power failure. I look around and see an entire generation of what I call the diligent saver. These are hardworking people brainwashed by the outdated financial gospel of their grandparents. They believe stashing a portion of their paycheck into a bank account makes them responsible. They operate on mid-20th century logic, back when a dollar actually held its ground. Applying that vintage advice to today's fiat system is like bringing a musket to a modern drone war. It is an archetype of financial foolishness guaranteeing you will outlive your money. The fatal flaw is rooted deeply in human psychology. Our brains are hardwired to process nominal numbers rather than real purchasing power. When you check your banking app and see your balance has not dropped, your primitive brain releases a hit of dopamine. You feel secure simply because the absolute number remains static. But your brain completely fails to calculate the invisible 5% drain happening simultaneously in the real economy. You are suffering from what behavioral economists call money illusion. You celebrate a 2% interest gain from your bank while ignoring the fact that housing and food costs just surged by 7%. You are standing on a treadmill that is accelerating backward, feeling accomplished just because your legs are moving. This biological blind spot is exactly what governments and central banks rely on to quietly confiscate your wealth without ever passing a formal tax law. To stop the silent bleeding, you must aggressively rewire your understanding of risk. Let me share a counterintuitive axiom that separates the financial elite from the perennial victims. In an environment of perpetual currency debasement, cash is not a safe haven. Cash is a guaranteed liability. Holding fiat currency is the only asset class where a long-term loss of purchasing power is an absolute mathematical certainty. Society tells you that holding cash is risk-free and investing in hard assets is dangerous. The exact opposite is true. The ultimate defensive baseline is not a pile of depreciating paper, but a fortified portfolio of scarce, tangible assets that governments cannot print out of thin air. You must permanently shift your mindset from hoarding dollars to holding hard assets. Watch how the elite operate when the money supply expands. They do not just survive this hidden X. They weaponize it through first principle reasoning. Fiat is programmed to lose value. Holding it is a fool's errand. Instead, they borrow depreciating currency at fixed rates and convert it into scarce assets. As inflation rages, their debt burden evaporates while their asset values skyrocket. They are shorting the fiat system. Every central bank expansion engineers a wealth transfer from terrified savers directly to those holding hard assets. The elite do not pay the inflation X, legion open They collect it. Look at the historical precedents mirroring our predicament. We went to the inflationary spiral of the 1970s. Spooked by instability, the middle class locked their capital into savings accounts and government bonds, clinging to an illusion of safety. Meanwhile, inflation compounded relentlessly. By the end of that decade, the purchasing power of those portfolios was gutted, cut in half by a silent predator. It was a systemic slaughter of generational wealth. If you want to avoid becoming a historical statistic, you must execute a ruthlessly precise reallocation of your capital today. Let me give you the exact mechanics to outpace this deficit. You must build a firewall around your purchasing power using assets that possess absolute scarcity. I am talking about prime real estate with fixed-rate debt, equities that command pricing power, and monetary metals that have survived every fiat collapse. When raw material costs rise, producing companies do not eat the loss. They pass that tax directly to the consumer, enriching their shareholders. You need to be on the receiving end of that transaction. You must pivot your capital into productive assets that generate yield above the real inflation rate. This is not about getting rich quick, but establishing a hard mathematical floor under your life. Executing this strategy requires a permanent shift in your cognitive framework. You are no longer a passive participant in a rigged economic game, storing your energy in a leaky bucket. You must step into the role of an active wealth preserver. The masses will continue to view price fluctuations with terror, obsessing over nominal dips. But once you internalize fiat debasement, your perspective elevates. You stop measuring wealth in dollars and start measuring it in ounces of gold, acres of land, and shares of global monopolies. When central banks fire up the printing presses, you will not feel the anxiety of a vict in watching their grocery bill double. You will feel the rational clarity of an operator who has positioned their pieces on the right side of the board. You are trading the illusion of stability for the absolute certainty of ownership. Ultimately, escaping this hidden axe is about something far more profound than just beating a benchmark. It is the ultimate reclamation of your personal freedom and financial sovereignty. Money is nothing more than stored human time and energy. When inflation silently drains your bank account, it is literally stealing the hours of your life you sacrificed away from your family. Protecting your capital is a moral imperative to defend your time. Finally, we are standing on the precipice of a decade where fiscal deficits will only widen. The silent predator is not going to retreat. So, I leave you with this one unavoidable question. When the dust settles 10 years from now, and the money supply has doubled yet again, will you be the one holding the depreciating paper,